The night was heavy with Florida humidity, the kind that made even silence feel suffocating. From the outside, the suburban home on the quiet cul-de-sac looked ordinary, an American dream tucked neatly between swaying palm trees and pastel-painted fences. But inside, the dream had already begun to rot. A plate clattered against the polished wood table. 16-year-old Lily slumped forward, her fork slipping from her hand. Her body seized in violent tremors as her eyes widened in shock. Lily! David, her stepfather, shot up from his chair, his voice breaking into panic. He rushed to her side, grasping her shoulders, desperate to steady her. Across the table, Elaine, the mother, sat frozen. Her expression was unreadable, caught somewhere between horror and a strange, quiet satisfaction. "Call! 911!" David shouted, shaking. His hands slipped as Lily's body jerked against him. He looked at his wife, his face frantic, but Elaine didn't move. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap. Her gaze locked on the girl, as though watching a performance she had anticipated for months. The shrill ring of the phone dial tone broke the tension. David scrambled for his cell, barking into the receiver. "My daughter! She's not breathing! She's poisoned or something! Please, hurry!" Minutes stretched into eternity. The room reeked of panic, of betrayal thick in the air. Elaine rose slowly, almost mechanically, as though detached from the scene unfolding before her. She reached for Lily's glass of water, lifted it to her lips, and then set it back down untouched. "She took everything from me," Elaine whispered, so low David almost didn't hear. "What?" he snapped, his face contorted with disbelief. But before he could press her, red and blue lights flooded the windows. Paramedics stormed through the door. They worked furiously, lifting Lily onto a stretcher, forcing oxygen, injecting medication. David hovered over them, wild with desperation, but Elaine lingered near the doorway, silent and composed, her hands trembling only slightly, as the stretcher rolled out into the humid night. Elaine stood at the threshold, watching the flashing lights carry her daughter away. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering, their curiosity mixing with concern. One paramedic turned briefly toward Elaine and asked, "Ma'am, what happened here?" Her answer was clipped, emotionless. She just collapsed, but her eyes betrayed something deeper, a storm of emotions churning beneath the surface: anger, betrayal, despair. The ambulance doors slammed shut, and the sirens wailed as they sped into the distance. David collapsed onto the porch steps, his face in his hands, muttering, "Please don't let her die. Please." Elaine remained standing, her shadow cast long in the flashing red glow. She didn't comfort him. She didn't weep. She only stared into the night, as though she already knew what the outcome would be. And in that moment, the illusion of a perfect Florida family shattered, leaving only secrets waiting to be unearthed. From the outside, the Ramirez household looked like any other in their quiet Florida suburb. Pastel paint gleamed against the sun. The lawn was neatly trimmed, and the mailbox bore a shiny brass plaque with their family name. Neighbors saw smiles on Sunday mornings, polite waves at the grocery store, and assumed that everything inside, that home, was just as flawless as its exterior. But inside, the story was different. Elaine Ramirez, 38, lived her life as though it were a performance. Every morning, she woke early, ironed her blouse, applied her makeup with precision, and presented herself to the world as the perfect wife and mother. But under the layers of mascara and control, she was unraveling. She felt time slipping away from her, her youth, her beauty, the ease with which people once noticed her. Now she lived in the shadow of her own daughter. Lily. 16, vibrant, quick-witted. When she walked into a room, heads turned. She didn't even try. For Elaine, every laugh, every compliment Lily received was a reminder of what she herself had lost. The mirror became her enemy. Each wrinkle, each pound she swore wasn't there last year, felt like proof that she was fading. And David, her husband, well, he didn't make it easier. David Ramirez was charming, The kind of man who could win over a room with a smile. In his early 40s, he was successful, respected, and admired. To outsiders, he seemed devoted, but behind closed doors, something in him had shifted. His marriage to Elaine felt stale, more like a partnership of habit than love. He spent long hours at work, or so he said, and when he came home, he buried himself in television or his phone. His eyes, once searching for Elaine, had grown distant. He had the life many men would envy: steady career, beautiful family, suburban comfort. Yet he felt restless, as though something essential was missing. That something came in the form of Lily. Lonely, craving attention, Lily gravitated toward David's easy charm. At first, it was harmless. She'd ask him for help with homework, linger by his chair to tell him about her day. David, flattered, encouraged her. He told himself he was being kind, supportive, the stepfather she needed. But the lines began to blur. Elaine noticed it before she could put it into words. The glances, the laughter that stopped the moment she walked into the room. The way Lily lit up around David in a way she never did with her. It gnawed at her. She told herself she was imagining it, that she was jealous, ridiculous, paranoid, but the feeling lingered. One evening at dinner, as the family sat beneath the warm glow of the chandelier, Elaine caught David's eyes lingering on Lily just a little too long. Lily laughed at something on her phone, tossing her hair over her shoulder, and for a split second, Elaine swore she saw desire in her husband's expression. Her stomach turned. She blinked it away, forcing herself to smile as though nothing had happened. But the seed of suspicion had been planted. Life in the Ramirez home became a balancing act of appearances and secrets. Elaine fussed over housework, over shopping lists, over whether her lipstick was bold enough to hide the weariness in her face. She tried to pull David closer, cooking his favorite meals, pressing him for conversation, but his responses were short, distracted. Meanwhile, Lily grew more rebellious. She stayed out late, texting constantly, her phone glued to her hand. When Elaine questioned her, Lily snapped back with venomous teenage defiance. "You don't understand me," she spat one night, slamming her bedroom door so hard the picture frames rattled. Elaine stood in the hallway, trembling with rage and hurt. David, sitting in the living room, barely looked up from his phone. The walls of their home absorbed every secret, every slammed door, every withheld word. To the neighbors, they were still perfect. The smiling family at the block barbecue, the couple that waved politely as they jogged past. But inside, the fractures deepened. Elaine began watching more closely. She noticed the way David's phone was always face down on the table, how he flinched when she reached for it. She saw Lily's sudden confidence, the glow in her cheeks when she laughed at something David said. And sometimes, late at night, Elaine swore she heard voices, whispers and laughter, from behind Lily's closed bedroom door. One night, long after the house had quieted, Elaine stood in the hallway, staring at that door. Her hand trembled on the knob. She pressed her ear against the wood, straining to catch the sounds inside. Faint murmurs, a low chuckle. Lily's voice, hushed, playful. Her heart pounded in her chest, bile rising in her throat. She wanted to throw the door open, to demand answers, to expose whatever was happening. But her hand froze. Instead, she stepped back, turned, and walked away into the darkness of her own bedroom. The narrator's voice returned, heavy with foreboding. At first, it looked like ordinary teenage rebellion, a distracted husband, a jealous wife, a daughter carving out her independence. But behind those locked doors and stolen glances lay a betrayal that would spiral into devastation. The cracks in this family's foundation were widening, and soon nothing would hold them together. Elaine lay awake in bed that night, her eyes wide in the dark, her mind racing. And downstairs, in the glow of the kitchen light, Lily's phone buzzed again and again. Elaine's sleepless nights turned into restless days. Each morning, she rose from bed with the same gnawing question. What's happening between them? At first, she told herself it was nothing, just her imagination, the insecurities of a woman nearing 40. But denial only worked for so long. The signs were multiplying, too loud to ignore. It started small. Lily hovered closer to David when he came home from work, greeting him with an eagerness she never showed her mother. She lingered near his chair during dinner, laughing at his dry humor, soaking in every word. David didn't stop her. In fact, he seemed to welcome it. Elaine would sit across the table, watching them share glances that lasted a heartbeat too long. Lily's giggles, David's smirks. It was a private conversation conducted in plain sight, and Elaine was always excluded. One evening, Lily brushed past David in the kitchen, her hand grazing his arm. His body stiffened, but he didn't pull away. Elaine, standing in the doorway, saw it all. Her chest tightened. She wanted to scream, to throw dishes against the wall, to demand what was happening in her own house. But David turned, handed her a plate, and asked casually, "Can you grab the salt?" As if nothing had happened. Elaine began searching for proof. She waited until David showered to scroll through his phone. Most messages were wiped clean, but once she found Lily's name in his recent calls. The log showed a late-night conversation that lasted nearly an hour. She waited until David showered to scroll through his phone. Most messages were wiped clean, but once she found Lily's name in his recent calls. The log showed a late-night conversation that lasted nearly an hour. Her hands trembled as she put the phone back. Later, she checked Lily's room, flipping through notebooks and drawers. Beneath a stack of school papers, she found a folded note, written in Lily's handwriting. "You make me feel like I finally matter. I can't stop thinking about you." The words blurred as Elaine's vision swam with tears. Her pulse raced. She sat on the edge of Lily's bed, gripping the note so tightly it crumpled in her hand. For Lily, the relationship was intoxicating. David told her she was mature beyond her years, smarter than most adults. He painted Elaine as controlling, unable to understand her daughter's growing independence. "You're special," he whispered one evening, when they were alone in the garage, under the hum of a flickering light. "Not like other girls your age. You deserve more than rules and curfews." To Lily, his words felt like salvation. She had always been lonely, invisible, dismissed as just a child. With David, she felt powerful, wanted. But to Elaine, it was betrayal stacked upon betrayal. Her husband, the man she trusted, was twisting her daughter's vulnerabilities into something unthinkable. The house no longer felt like hers. Conversations stopped when she entered a room. David brushed her off with excuses, late meetings, deadlines, fatigue. Lily rolled her eyes at every attempt at discipline, spitting venomous words like, "Why do you even care?" Elaine felt invisible, a ghost haunting her own family. At church, neighbors complimented her on her beautiful daughter, her handsome husband. Elaine forced smiles, but inside, she was unraveling. She wanted to shout the truth, to expose the sickness growing inside her home, but shame kept her silent. Late at night, she sat in the kitchen, chain-smoking cigarettes, staring at the family photos on the wall, smiling faces, vacations, birthdays, lies, all of them. The discovery came on a humid Friday evening. Elaine returned home earlier than expected. The house was quiet, too quiet. She set down her groceries, listening. Then she heard it, faint laughter drifting down the hallway. Lily's voice, David's deeper chuckle, blending with hers. Her chest pounded as she crept closer. The bedroom door was cracked open. Through the sliver, she saw them. Lily perched on the bed, David sitting beside. Their knees almost touching. Lily held out her phone, showing him something, and he leaned close, smiling, his hand resting on the blanket between them. Elaine pushed the door wider. "What the hell is going on here?" The words cut through the room like a knife. Lily jerked, upright, her face pale. David froze, his jaw tightening. "Mum, it's not what it looks like," Lily stammered, shoving her phone under a pillow. "Not what it looks like." Elaine's voice shook with fury. "You're in here, alone, with him, in the dark. Tell me again how I'm supposed to believe this." David stood, his tone calm, too calm. "Elaine, you're overreacting. We were just talking." Her hands trembled at her sides. "Talking? At 11 o'clock at night? Behind a closed door?" Lily's eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand me, Mom. He listens. You never do." The words cut deeper than Elaine expected. She staggered back, staring at her daughter as if she didn't recognize her. "You think this is love?" Elaine spat. This sickness? He's your stepfather." David's voice hardened. "Enough. Don't twist this into something it's not." Elaine turned on him, her face red with rage. "Then what is it, David? Tell me. Look me in the eye and tell me what you've been doing with my daughter." Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. David opened his mouth, but no words came. Elaine's eyes flicked to Lily, who stared at the floor, her face blotched with shame. And in that silence, Elaine knew she didn't need him to confess. She had her answer. Elaine left the room without another word, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. She stumbled into the bathroom, gripping the sink, gasping for air. Her reflection stared back at her, eyes wild, cheeks streaked with tears, lips trembling. "They've taken everything from me," she thought. "My husband, my daughter, my life." Her chest heaved as she reached into the drawer, pulling out the crumpled note she had hidden days earlier. She unfolded it, rereading the words Lily had written. "I can't stop thinking about you." Elaine tore the paper in half, then again, until it was nothing but shreds. She let the pieces fall into the sink like ashes. Her voice was hoarse when she whispered, "If they think they can destroy me, they're wrong." That night, Elaine sat awake in the kitchen, staring at the clock. Midnight, 1 a.m., 2. The house was silent, but her mind roared with rage. Images flashed. Lily's laughter, David's smile, their whispers in the dark. She poured herself a glass of wine, drained it, poured another. And somewhere between the second and third glass, the thought came, dark, sharp. If she's gone, it ends. The problem disappears. The thought terrified her at first, but the longer she sat in the silence, the more it settled into her bones. By sunrise, Elaine had made her decision. Elaine's eyes had grown accustomed to the glow of the rental houses, dim lamps, yet her heart hadn't adjusted to the shadows creeping into her marriage. The ocean breeze slipped through cracked windows, carrying the salt and the sound of waves that should have soothed her, but instead deepened the silence at the dinner table. David sat across from her, sipping wine with that easy charm, but his gaze lingered too long on Lily. Elaine caught it, felt it burn into her, but said nothing. Her fork pressed hard into her plate, scraping porcelain, the only sound besides the rhythmic tide outside. For days, little moments had added up to something undeniable. Lily's laughter rising higher when David spoke, David pouring wine into her glass before Elaine's, the way their hands brushed as though it was all by accident. Elaine kept swallowing it down, convincing herself it was paranoia. Tonight, however, something shifted. After dinner, as the others retreated, Elaine lingered in the hallway. She heard voices drifting from the patio, David's deep tone and Lily's softer one, mingling like a duet rehearsed too many times. Her chest tightened. She leaned closer, each word sharpening into a blade. "I can't keep doing this," Lily whispered. "Someone will notice." "No one will," David said smoothly, his voice carrying the conviction of a man who believed he could bend reality. Elaine trusts me. She'll never see it. Elaine's stomach turned to stone. Every instinct screamed to burst through the door, to demand answers, to end the humiliation here and now. But instead, she froze, her palm pressed against the wall, nails digging into the paint. A quiet gasp escaped her, one she prayed they hadn't heard. She stumbled back to her room, closing the door with trembling hands. Sleep never came. The bed felt like a coffin, heavy with betrayal. She lay awake, rehearsing confrontations in her head, each one more vicious than the last. When the morning sun cut through the blinds, she was hollow-eyed, running on nothing but adrenaline. The day began with forced smiles and forced small talk. Elaine prepared breakfast, her hands stiff, each plate hitting the counter with more force than necessary. Lily strolled in late, hair tousled, wearing David's college sweatshirt. Elaine's gaze froze on the fabric. David glanced at her, saw the recognition in her eyes, and quickly looked away. "Morning," Lily said casually, as though the world hadn't shifted under Elaine's feet. Elaine's voice was cold steel. "Sleep well?" Lily hesitated, then nodded. David jumped in, pouring coffee with unnecessary enthusiasm. "We should all go down to the beach today, relax, clear our heads." Elaine wanted to scream, but she swallowed the fury once again. She nodded instead, because she needed the right moment, the perfect strike. The beach was postcard perfect, waves glittering under the sun. Families laughed nearby, surfers cut through the water, children built castles that would soon collapse. Elaine walked beside David and Lily, her bare feet sinking into sand, but her mind was elsewhere. Every laugh between them felt like a dagger, every shared glance like salt in the wound. By the afternoon, the charade cracked. They sat beneath a striped umbrella, the cooler half empty, the air thick with heat. Elaine pulled out her phone, pretending to scroll when a shadow fell over her. David and Lily sat too close, their shoulders brushing. Elaine's blood roared in her ears. She turned sharply. "Why don't you two just admit it?" The words landed like thunder. David froze, his drink halfway to his lips. Lily paled, the color draining from her face. Silence stretched, only the crash of waves filling it. David forced a laugh. "What are you talking about?" Elaine's eyes locked on him. "Don't insult me. I hear the whispers. I see the looks. I'm not blind." Lily's hands trembled, twisting the hem of her shorts. "Elaine, it's not—" "Don't you dare lie to me," Elaine snapped, her voice breaking. "My sister, my own blood, in my home, with my husband." The confrontation drew eyes. A couple on a nearby blanket turned to watch, then another family paused mid-game. The vacation atmosphere soured, curiosity buzzing in the air. David's mask slipped, frustration tightening his jaw. "Elaine, lower your voice." "No," she spat. "Not anymore. You don't get to control this, not after what you've done." The wind picked up, flinging sand against their legs. Lily whispered, almost inaudible, "I didn't mean for this to happen." Elaine's chest heaved. "You didn't mean to. You climbed into my life, into my marriage, and you didn't mean to." Her voice cracked, raw, louder than she intended. David grabbed her arm, trying to steady her, but she yanked it free. "Don't touch me," she hissed. "Every time you laid a hand on her, you betrayed me. Every kiss, every word, every lie. You destroyed everything we built." The crowd had gathered now, drawn by the rawness, the spectacle. Strangers stood in silence, the ocean suddenly just background noise to the storm unraveling in front of them. Lily's eyes filled with tears. "Elaine, please, Elaine cut her off with a raised hand. "Save it. You're not my sister anymore." The words struck harder than any slap. Lily broke, sobbing quietly, her shoulders shaking. David looked between them, caught in the wreckage, his bravado gone. Elaine rose to her feet, the sand clinging to her legs. She looked down at them both, voice trembling but steady enough to carry. This marriage is over, and you, her gaze stabbed at Lily. You've lost me forever. The silence afterward was heavier than any scream. Elaine turned, walking away, each step sinking deep, her breath ragged but determined. She didn't know what came next, only that she couldn't stay. Behind her, the crowd murmured, some shaking their heads, others whispering judgments. David called out her name once, desperate, but she never turned back. As she disappeared up the boardwalk, her mind raced with a single thought. There was no going back now. The betrayal was public, undeniable, carved into memory like the tide, carving the shore. And though her body shook with rage and sorrow, beneath it all, something new stirred, a strange clarity. A storm had broken, but what lay on the other side remained unknown. That night, as the sun bled into the horizon and darkness reclaimed the beach, David and Lily sat in silence, their guilt too heavy to speak through. Elaine, alone in her room, stared at the suitcase on the floor. She knew she would have to decide. Leave this place with dignity or stay and fight for scraps of what was already dead. The sound of the waves outside was relentless, crashing again and again like a reminder. Nothing ever truly stayed hidden. Elaine sat on the edge of her bed, the room dark except for the glow of the street lamp outside. The sound of the waves from the beach earlier still lingered in her mind, echoing like a warning she couldn't shake. The confrontation had left the house fractured, every laugh, every glance now etched into memory as proof of betrayal. She could hear the faint creak of the floorboards downstairs. Lily and David still awake, whispering quietly, their voices carrying guilt and fear in equal measure. Her chest tightened as she thought about what had happened. The vacation, meant to be an escape, had revealed the rot at the heart of her family. She had confronted them, exposed their deception, but the victory felt hollow. Everything had changed. Everything she had trusted, everything she had loved, now felt poisoned. Outside, the humid Florida night pressed against the windows. Elaine's hands trembled as she reached for her phone, scrolling through messages she hadn't dared open all day. Friends asking if the trip was going well, co-workers checking in, the world carrying on oblivious to the chaos inside this house. She ignored them all, letting the silence consume her. Downstairs, David paced, his movements sharp, desperate. Lily sat on the couch, knees drawn to her chest, crying silently. Elaine could hear snippets of their conversation. "I didn't think she would find out this fast," David muttered, voice low. "What do we do now?" "I don't care anymore," Lily whispered, tears soaking her hands. I don't want to see her. I can't face her." Elaine leaned back against the headboard, closing her eyes. A strange mix of relief and sorrow settled over her. The truth was out. The betrayal was laid bare. Yet, the cost was enormous. Her family was broken, and there was no turning back. She rose and walked to the window, staring out at the dark horizon where the ocean met the sky. The water reflected her turmoil. Restless, turbulent, impossible to control. For hours she watched it, letting herself breathe, letting herself feel the rawness of her emotions. Grief, anger, heartbreak, and a small, stubborn seed of empowerment, all mingled in her chest. The next morning, the house was quiet, eerily so. David left early, claiming he needed to think, needing space. Lily stayed in her room, the weight of her shame pressing down so heavily she barely moved. Elaine sat at the kitchen table, staring at a half-empty coffee cup, the sun rising slowly through the blinds. She finally allowed herself to remember the old life, the birthdays, the laughter, the ordinary comforts, and mourn it. She began making phone calls, one after another, carefully laying out arrangements to return home. Friends, family, even the rental company received brief messages. Nothing more than logistical details, no explanations, no excuses. Elaine understood she had to reclaim control of her own life, to step out of the shadow of deception that had suffocated her for months. By afternoon, the house had emptied. Elaine moved through the rooms, pausing at the living room where shattered glass from the confrontation still lay. She picked up a shard, holding it as though she could cut away the memories themselves. It was futile, of course. Nothing could erase the betrayal. Nothing could undo the choices that had been made. Yet, amidst the ruin, there was clarity. Elaine realized that her sense of self, her moral compass, and her courage were intact. She had acted, confronted the truth, and refused to be complicit. That realization became a small, steady flame inside her, something she would carry forward even as the pieces of her family lay scattered. Later that evening, she received a text from a friend checking in. Elaine typed a single word: precise, final, done. It was not triumph, nor joy. It was resolution. A statement that she was no longer caught between the lies of others. She had survived the storm, and while the wreckage remained, she would move forward with intention and awareness. In the following days, life continued its relentless pace. News of the confrontation had not escaped their circle. Whispers circulated among neighbors and distant relatives, but Elaine refused to justify herself. She ignored calls that sought to exploit scandal or fuel gossip. Instead, she focused on rebuilding her own routines, restoring small pockets of normalcy, and protecting her heart from further harm. Lily eventually emerged from her room, timid, remorseful, but hesitant to reach out. David's presence became a quiet absence. His attempts to reconcile brushed off with polite but firm boundaries. Elaine understood the damage could not be undone. Trust, once broken, is a fragile thing. Yet, in acknowledging the end, she felt a strange freedom. She was no longer tied to deceit, no longer trapped in a role that demanded tolerance of betrayal. At night, Elaine would walk along the shoreline alone, the sand cool beneath her feet, waves whispering against her legs. She reflected on the events, the anger, the heartbreak, the revelation, and allowed herself to feel the enormity of it all. The weight of betrayal was immense, but it had also forced her to confront the truths she had avoided for too long. She thought of justice, not legal but personal, and recognized it in the choices she had made. Confrontation, exposure, refusal to remain silent. These were her acts of accountability. Elaine understood that consequences were not always external. They often came first to the conscience, and she had met hers head-on. And somewhere in that, confrontation. In the raw clarity of exposure, Elaine discovered something essential. Her sense of self was not contingent on the loyalty of others. Her life, her choices, and her integrity remained hers alone. She carried that knowledge forward, even as the echoes of the storm inside her home persisted. The house, once full of laughter and the promise of family, had become a monument to truth. Elaine accepted the solitude as a consequence, but also as a gift, a space in which she could breathe, think, and rebuild without pretense. The betrayal had been catastrophic, but survival, reflection, and moral clarity remained. As the sun rose on the final morning of their vacation, Elaine packed her things in silence. She glanced at the rooms she had inhabited, at the shattered pieces, at the spaces that had held lies and whispered secrets. She carried nothing but the lessons, the clarity, and the certainty that she would never again surrender herself to deception or manipulation. Walking out of the house, the waves, crashing one last time against the shore, Elaine felt the weight lift slightly from her shoulders. The storm had passed, but the mark it left was indelible. She would move forward cautiously, aware of human frailty, but fortified by her own courage. In the quiet aftermath, Elaine understood the truth that underpinned all human relationships. Trust is earned, respect is chosen, and betrayal, no matter how painful, can illuminate a path towards self-preservation and moral clarity. The experience would haunt her, yes, but it would also teach her resilience. She looked back one final time, letting the house recede into the horizon, and whispered to herself, "I am not broken. I am not defeated. I am free." Elaine drove, home alone, the highway stretching ahead like a ribbon of possibility and caution. The sun had just begun to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and grey, and she let herself breathe for the first time in weeks. The chaos of betrayal, the confrontation, the heartbreak, it was all behind her, yet etched into her mind with painful clarity. Every choice, every confrontation had consequences she could neither erase nor ignore. She reflected on what had brought her here. Trust, she realized, is fragile, like glass. Once it cracks, even slightly, the fissures spread until nothing holds the shape it once did. David's manipulation, Lily's misguided longing, the secrecy. All of it had been preventable, perhaps, if honesty had lived in the corners of their home. But it hadn't, and Elaine's reckoning had been inevitable. Elaine thought about Lily, her daughter, and the choices that young hearts make when craving attention, validation, or love. Vulnerability can be exploited, and innocence twisted. Elaine understood this now, better than ever, as she glimpsed the broader lesson. People's desires are powerful, often uncontrollable, yet they must be met with boundaries and responsibility. The failure to set limits had shattered her family, leaving scars no apology could erase. And yet, amid the pain, Elaine recognized her own resilience. She had faced the unimaginable and acted, not with passivity, but with courage. She had confronted betrayal directly, exposed the truth, and refused to be complicit. Survival, she realized, is not only about enduring, but about asserting one's integrity even when the cost is unbearable. She imagined the lives of others who had walked paths similar to hers, lives quietly consumed by deception, by choices that left morality blurred and hearts aching. The lesson, she thought, was universal. The human heart is capable of extraordinary love, but also extraordinary betrayal. Awareness, vigilance, and moral courage are the tools to navigate the dangerous terrain of relationships and desire. Elaine's mind lingered on the complexity of justice. It is not always found in courts or legal systems. Sometimes, it exists only in the alignment of one's conscience. The punishment for wrongdoing does not always come from others, but from the inevitability of truth being revealed. She had seen it firsthand. The confrontation had been both exposure and catharsis. It had ripped open deceit, but also provided clarity. By the time she reached her driveway, the morning was fully alive. Birds calling, cars passing, the world moving forward with indifferent precision. Elaine stepped out of the car, feeling the weight in her chest lift slightly. She had endured darkness, but in doing so, she had reclaimed herself. Her family might never heal. Her heart might carry the memory of betrayal forever. But Elaine had learned something essential: that self-respect, moral integrity, and awareness of human vulnerability are the truest forms of justice one can wield. Standing in the sunlight, Elaine whispered into the quiet. Pain teaches, betrayal reveals, truth liberates. She understood that every shadow she had faced, every act of deception, was a mirror of human weakness, and in facing it, she had emerged stronger, wiser, and unbroken. The storm had been brewing all day, though no one outside could see it. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, the rain tapped against windows like whispered warnings, a steady rhythm that echoed the tension inside the house. Mara sat at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing the rim of a coffee mug she hadn't drunk from in hours. The aroma of the brewed coffee did nothing to calm the churn in her stomach. Something was off. She could feel it in her bones. Her son, Caleb, had been acting strangely for weeks, sneaking out at odd hours, coming home late with clothes damp from rain or sweat. At first, Mara had brushed it off as teenage rebellion, but her instincts screamed otherwise. There were phone calls she wasn't supposed to see, messages deleted too quickly, half-whispered conversations that ended the moment she entered the room. The tension had built into a tight knot in her chest, one she could no longer ignore. That evening, Mara's husband, Tom, returned from work. His presence was heavy with exhaustion, or perhaps guilt. Mara watched him silently from across the room. Noting the way his eyes flicked to Caleb's empty bedroom door, the hesitation in his step, something had shifted between them, a subtle tension that Mara had not seen before. She realized that the cracks were no longer hidden. They were wide enough to step through. "Tom," she said quietly, almost under her breath. "What's going on?" He froze as if caught in a lie, and then turned with a forced smile. "What do you mean?" "I mean the late nights, the hidden texts, the excuses." "Something is wrong," Mara replied, her voice gaining strength with each word. Tom's smile faltered. "Mara, it's just Caleb. He's a teenager. He's going through stuff. You don't need to—" "No," she interrupted, standing now, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "I need to know the truth, and I need to know it now." For a moment, silence swallowed the room. Then Tom's shoulders slumped, and he let out a long, shaky sigh. "You weren't supposed to find out this way," he said, voice low. Mara's heart thumped painfully. "Find out what?" Tom hesitated, glancing toward the hallway where Caleb's door stood closed. "Caleb, he's been seeing someone he shouldn't be." Mara felt her stomach drop, a cold wave washing over her. "Who?" Tom's eyes darted, and finally he muttered, "It's your sister, Mara, Emily." The world tilted. Mara felt the kitchen spinning, the coffee mug trembling in her hand. Her sister, her own blood. She had always trusted Emily, confided in her, shared the small, secret moments of life she thought were safe. And now, Mara's son, Caleb, had crossed that line, and Emily had allowed it. "You're lying," Mara said, though her voice shook. Deep down, she knew he wasn't. She had felt the changes in Caleb's behavior, the way he had grown secretive, how Emily had lingered too long during family dinners. "You're lying," she repeated, but there was no conviction, only rising dread. Tom shook his head, running a hand over his face. "I wish I were, but it's true. I found messages on his phone, pictures, and Emily, she knows. She's been encouraging him." Mara's knees buckled. She sank into the nearest chair, her hands covering her face. Her chest heaved with a mix of horror, disbelief, and a rage that simmered, threatening to boil over. "My sister, my son." The words tasted like poison. For hours, Mara sat there, replaying every interaction she had ever had with Emily, every whispered conversation, every weekend visit. The betrayal wasn't just about desire. It was about trust, about family, about the invisible line that had been crossed. She realized that Emily had exploited Caleb's vulnerability, and in doing so, had broken her family in a way that could not easily be repaired. The storm outside intensified, rain hammering the roof, thunder rolling across the sky. Mara's thoughts grew darker, sharper. She imagined confronting Emily, dragging her into the light, exposing everything. But part of her wondered if exposure would be enough. Exposure would not erase what had been done. Exposure would not protect Caleb from the guilt, from the tangled emotions that had already taken root in his young mind. By midnight, the house was silent except for the storm. Mara paced the kitchen, her mind a whirlwind of decisions and consequences. She could call the police. She could confide in family friends. She could demand Emily leave her life forever. But each option carried weight, risk, and the undeniable truth that the bonds of blood could be destroyed in an instant by desire and secrecy. Her phone buzzed. A message from Emily. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I love him." Mara stared at the screen, the words searing her like fire. Emily's confession was both a plea and a challenge. It forced Mara to confront a truth she wasn't ready for. Some betrayals could not be forgiven, some acts could not be undone. And yet, as the rain lashed against the windows, Mara felt a spark of clarity amidst the chaos. She had to act, not out of revenge, not out of anger, but out of protection for herself, and for the remnants of the family that remained. She could not allow the lie to continue, could not allow the darkness to fester further. The storm began to recede, leaving the house drenched but quiet. Mara exhaled, her breath steadying, a sense of grim determination settling in. She would confront Emily in the morning. She would demand the truth face to face, and she would make choices that preserved what little integrity remained in a world turned upside down. Her heart still ached. Her trust was shattered. But Mara understood one thing. In the aftermath of betrayal, action was the only path to survival, and she was ready.